Hey guys, it's Sign here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing something slightly different from usual. It's kind of like a tag video. A friend of the channel, Jay from Comic Swag, recently did a video about why he is into comics, why he likes comics. It's based on a set of questions a friend of his sent him, and he made a video and he talked about how he would like other people to make the video as well. So we're going to do that now. So there's kind of 4 questions here that we're going to be looking at. The first one is, how did you get into comics? And it's kind of a weird question for me because I don't think I necessarily ever actively chose to get into comic books, like in the sense that I didn't really go out of my way. I just kind of like them, and then they were kind of around all the time, so I kind of just ended up liking them, right? But at the same time, there are specific moments in my life when I was like, okay, I'm gonna start buying comic books now, right? And that kind of really depends on how you want to look at it, right? So when I was a kid, I liked comics. I had quite a few of them growing up, but I wasn't like a super fan of superheroes, right? I liked a lot of them growing up. Obviously, I grew up when, animated shows, for the X-Men and for the Justice League and stuff were very popular, right? And Teen Titans and stuff. So I liked all of these characters. I like all of these shows, but I didn't really know that there was comic books for them, that they were based on older characters, right? But I knew that comic books existed, and I read some of them, right? Mostly the Bart Simpson comic books, and I read Bowen a few times, and, stuff like that. Eventually, I got older. I became a teenager. I started buying manga, mostly just manga from the used bookstore that was near me, and most of that was just Dragon Ball and Naruto. And one of my oldest friends ever, his family or his dad specifically, was a huge Superman fan, and he had a giant collection of comic books, mostly trades and hardcovers and stuff. And I started borrowing them from him because at that point I had gotten into Green Arrow, or Arrow the TV show, and I wanted to read more stuff like that, right? And so my friend would give me a bunch of comic books that he had, and I would read a lot of them. So I've read a lot of the seminal Superman, Elseworld stories, and quite a few of the Batman ones. But it was more like, okay, I'm just gonna read this and I'm move on with my life, right? It wasn't until I got to college and I moved out of my parents' house. I mean, the vast majority of my stuff is still there, but I live here in an apartment in a city 4 hours away from them. And I started getting back into reading in general, right? After high school, there'd been a while, or late high school, early college, there'd been a while when I wasn't really reading. I wasn't all that interested in stuff. And for whatever reason, I got back into it. When I moved from the dorms to my first apartment, which was next to the school, next to the university I go to, I started buying comic books again and manga because I started this channel. It was kind of funny because it was right before COVID started, and I thought it was going to be cool and interesting, and it was a good way to pass time. And it wasn't because COVID had started that I did it. It just happened that I started and then COVID became a real thing, right? Because I started literally the week before we all went off for spring break, and COVID extended that for 3 years, right? And then I naturally just started collecting comic books from there. Every once in a while, I'm mostly focused on manga. However, when I moved back here after COVID, because I lived with my parents for most of it, and we moved to this apartment, me and my friends, I realized that there was a comic book store up the road. And I decided that I wanted to start collecting single issues. So I went there, I asked them, hey, how do I make a list? How do I order things from you guys? They told me how to do it. We set it up real quick. I made a League of Comic Geeks account. I set it up. I put them as my main comic book store. Then I started buying single issue comics. And then after that, it slowly grew into buying collected editions. And then I finally got around to buying, omnibuses and special deluxe editions and stuff like that. And that is how I got into comic books. Mostly, it's just kind of a very natural progression that involves a certain level of decision making every once in a while in order to get me to where I am now. And now I have, all of this. And it's not like a very exciting, interesting story, but it's how I got into comic books. It was a very natural progression. It was mostly just from me wanting to get into it. It wasn't like something that I inherited from my parents or anything like that, right? A lot of people talk about the fact that, their parents like comic books growing up, and so they would get comic books too and stuff like that. That really doesn't apply to me. My dad was a very serious, kind of guy. He was like, I like work, I like learning about science, and I like Star Wars, and that's basically all he likes. And liked back then, and now he's a lot more open to stuff because I show him stuff and he's willing to get into it, right? And stuff like that. But it's not like I inherited this from anyone. It wasn't like given to me by a family friend or my uncles or anything like that. This is all me just figuring it out on my own and getting around to liking this stuff on my own. And I love this stuff. It's great. So that's it for how I got into comic books. The second question is, what made you jump into YouTube? And I kind of touched on it a little bit, but basically, I was bored. I wanted to do something different. I had been watching a lot of booktubers, and I had realized that vast majority of booktubers at the time were women, and that they basically only talked about stuff that was related to YA fantasy and some adult fantasy, right? There was like Daniel Green and Mike's Book Reviews that did, on content that were guys that did that, and they mostly talked about adult fantasy, right? But I didn't really notice that there was I noticed that there wasn't very many people that were doing content around manga, or at least that they weren't doing it the same way that booktubers do, right? Which is what I do. I do booktube content, but I basically only talk about manga, or mostly talk about manga, and now comic books, right? My channel has grown to include comic books as well, and sometimes it's like, oh, I'm mostly doing comic book content, let me go back to doing some manga content, right? And it kind of flip-flops a lot during the months based on what's happening, right? So I noticed that, and then I noticed that the vast majority of people that do manga and anime content mostly did anime content, and it was all very much like niche. It was like, I only talk about Dragon Ball. I'm the Dragon Ball guy. I'm only going to talk about Dragon Ball. And that was annoying and boring to me. So I launched my channel, and then COVID happened, and a bunch of other people launched channels as well. And then it became a really interesting kind of community thing, right? And I had wanted to do it because I wanted to have community. I'd been getting into light novels at the time, and my friends, my roommates, are fans of manga and anime, but they're pretty, casual about it. And I wanted someone that was less casual to talk to, right? Someone that's a bit more serious about it, that was more interested in getting deep into content and kind of discussing it and talking about it and, sharing opinions on it. And that wasn't necessarily something that they would provide. And then I didn't want to do it with people that I knew from campus because most of them were a bit too weird for me. So I decided that online was probably the best way to do it. I did find a community. I talked to some of those people still, but I moved on to other things, right? And they have to. And so I don't necessarily talk to the vast majority of people that I started YouTube with, but I appreciate them and I still watch their content from time to time, and it is what it is, right? And so I made my YouTube channel for a sense of community. I wanted to talk about certain things in a way that was different from what most people did, and it's worked and also kind of hasn't, right? Because just the nature of YouTube and maybe the way I make my videos or the way I talk or the way I look or something makes it difficult for people to really want to click on my videos and then keep watching them beyond the first couple minutes and then subscribe. And I've managed to make that happen enough for 1,200 people to do that. And I really appreciate every single one of you guys. But, it's kind of funny that you would expect, okay, that I expected nothing, but also thought that it might be possible for me to grow pretty large based on the type of content I was making, and then it happened that it wasn't the case. Could I do things better and differently and really make this a career? Sure, but I'm not really interested in doing that. This is mostly just for fun. So I'm gonna stick to what I do, and if that doesn't really work for people, that's okay. But it is what it is. That's just kind of how it goes. Sometimes I do get kind of bogged down in the fact that, my channel doesn't grow or didn't grow as much as other people that started at the same time as me. Why is that? Is it this, is it that? And I kind of get bogged down in it sometimes, but not very often. I try to stay away from that sort of thinking because it's not really helpful or meaningful. It's actually kind of counterintuitive to what I want to do with this channel, which is just have fun and talk to people, right? If I start focusing on things like viewership and changing up the way I make content or nicheifying myself, that kind of loses a lot of the reasons for this, right? It turns into a job. It turns into something for money, and I don't necessarily want that to be the case. Like, would I like to get some money from all the effort that I put into this? Sure, but it's not necessarily something that I need. You know, I have an engineering degree. I'm working on an MBA. I will eventually make money. It's just a time, like a time thing, right? I don't necessarily need this to make me money, at least at the time, right? So it's not really that big of a deal, but you know, it does kind of hurt sometimes that you're like, oh shit, I do all of this and no one really seems to care. It is what it is. It's just kind of normal. It's fine. But yeah, that's how I got into YouTube. The next question is, what book are you most looking forward to in the coming, you know, months? I think today is the release date for it, August 13th when I record this video, but the book I'm most looking forward to this year is the second deluxe hardcover for Once and Future, the Kieran Gillen and Dan Mora series. I love those books. I like the first one a lot. I got it for like my birthday 2 years ago, I think. My sister got it for me, and I loved it. I thought it was awesome, and I want to read the rest of it, but I wanted it in the same edition, right? So the slipcase came out last week, and I think today, August 13th, was the day that the main one, or the normal one, came out, the normal deluxe edition. But I'm probably not gonna get my hands on it until December. So that kind of sucks, and that's why I'm looking forward to it, even though it just came out. But I mean, it's exciting. I'm very happy about that. There really isn't too much else. I mean, there's the Radiant Black hardcover, although I think that comes out in January. There's a the Wonder Woman, or sorry, no, the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow book came out recently, and I think I have that ordered, or someone said they were gonna buy it for me for my birthday. I can't remember. I think it was my friend. He told me, hey, what do you want? And I told him these things, and he was like, okay. And then the other day he texted me, hey, I got them, but I don't know what he got me. So I might have it already or not, or like, you know, it might be coming in. I'm not really sure. I'll check in with you guys at the end of August. But yeah, so I would say Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, or more specifically, and the Once and Future deluxe hardcover volume 2. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't really follow hardcover releases all that much, so I don't know too much else, but that's probably the two that I'm most excited about, because I really want to have those two books in my collection, right? So yeah, lastly is, what is the favorite book in my collection? It's kind of hard to say, actually. So there's kind of a few of them, and they have value to me for different reasons. So I'll just kind of go through all of them, right? So when I started this channel, the first book that I read, or the first comic book that I read, was Witchblade and Fathom. And I read them because I had a week of Kindle Unlimited, and both of those books were on there. I never did reviews for it, but I was, you know, going through every used bookstore that I could find to see if I could find those books. I never got around to finding them, but one of the local comic book stores near me does carry the complete Fathom paperbacks, and I also found that Walmart sometimes sells the Witchblade ones, as long as they're in stock. And so recently, I think last year actually, I got my hands on this Witchblade collection, right? The complete Witchblade book 1. And this is one of my favorite books in terms of like how it looks and kind of what it means, right? This is like the start of my reading journey with comic books as an adult. And I think that's super cool and really meaningful. That's really interesting. And then the first comic book that I actively remember buying, because when I was a kid, I remember having 2 different comic books, and I remember them pretty clearly. One of them is the first volume, I guess, of Transformers Armada. And I remember reading that over and over again, but I don't remember buying it. So I don't know where it came from. I'm pretty sure it was like a Scholastics thing, but I don't have a memory of that in my head. The second one is a Garfield Sunday Comics collection. And that's not mine. It was my sister's, my little sister. We bought it in Mexico one time. We were down there visiting family. We were at a mall and they had a bookstore. And me and my sister went to the kids section to see what was there. And my sister was really excited about this Garfield book. And so my dad got it for us. I remember reading it quite a few times because I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny. But it wasn't mine. So that's not, you know, like it wasn't like... it doesn't have a special place in my heart, right? So the first comic book that I remember properly buying myself, or like buying thanks to my parents, was a Mexican edition of Superman Earth 1. This is in English. This is the American edition. This is a hardcover. The one I'm talking about is a Mexican edition. It's a paperback. It's in Spanish. And I remember buying it at a mall in this store called Sanborn's, which is kind of like a fancy version of Macy's. You know, I mean, Macy's is kind of fancy, but like Sanborn's is fancier. And it's a Mexican department store. And I don't know why, I thought this image looked cool as fuck. And so I asked my parents to buy it for me. It was relatively affordable, so they were like, yeah, sure, whatever, man, go for it, but only one, right? And so that's the one I got because I wanted a few of them. And so that is like one of my favorite books, even though I don't necessarily think it's the best story ever. It's one of my favorites because it's the first comic book trade that I remember buying that I remember was mine, you know, individually, that I have a memory of buying, right? And then, in terms of like my adult life, one of my favorite comic books is Aquaman by Jeff Johns. Specifically the first volume, but I don't have that anymore because I switched it out when my sister gifted this to me. And so this is special to me because it's the first comic book that I bought for the channel. Like not for the channel, but it's the first comic book that I remember putting in a haul in one of my channel videos, right? So I think the first haul I ever did for the channel has the first volume of New 52, Jeff Johns' Aquaman. And so that's why it's one of my favorite books, because it's special, right, in that sense. And then, otherwise, there's two more left here. So in terms of like a random trade that I think is really cool and awesome, God Country. I think my parents got this for my birthday like a few years ago, in the sense that they gave me money and they were like, spend it on whatever you want. And so I spent it on comic books. And this is one of the ones that I bought. And I love this story. It's amazing. Donny Cates is wonderful. If there's one complaint I have about this is that I would have preferred a different artist. But even within that complaint, the art style here is amazing. It's phenomenal. It's crazy. It looks so cool. And the story is so special. It's about fatherhood, and it's about, you know, being a son and the difficulties of communication between father and son, and how that kind of can sometimes be difficult. It doesn't really have anything to do with me. I have a really good relationship with my dad. I have a really good understanding with him. There really is almost never any friction between us. But I'm still a young man with a father that's twice as old as me. And so there's always some sort of like friction or issue or this like, you know, thing between us sometimes. And it's pretty minimal and unimportant, but that idea still permeates some of the thoughts that we have about each other, right? Or at least the thoughts that I have about my dad. And this story is really good at turning that into a fantasy and trying to help you explore why that might be. And it's really interesting. And it's mostly just men are bad at communicating about their feelings, but also this crazy old man that is having horrible, like degenerative mental diseases, is also fighting God with a giant ass sword. And that's cool as fuck. And it's amazing. And I really, really loved it. And I'm pretty sure I cried reading that. So like, it's awesome. I really, really love it. So that's the fourth favorite book that I have. And the fifth one is the Conan ongoing series. Specifically, I love the parts where it's Jim Zub and Rob De La Torre. I love that stuff because Rob De La Torre's artwork is amazing, right? But this series is really special to me because it's really interesting. It really helped my channel grow a lot to start reviewing it. I really loved my experience recently with Howard Days, where I went down to Cross Plains, Texas, 2 hours away from me, and got to meet a bunch of people that work on this, got to interact with them and have cool conversations with them for like days at a time. And it's really special because of that, but also because it helped my channel, but also because it's such a cool, like, it almost feels like the story that I'd always wanted, in the sense that I've always been a fan of fantasy. I've always liked dudes with swords, and for whatever reason, I don't think I ever found the right combination of those things. Even though I have many, many other stories that I like more than Conan, this kind of encapsulates, Jim and Rob Del Torre managed to encapsulate like the most basic, bare essence of cool fucking weird fantasy that I like. And it works really, really nicely for me, right? I really, really enjoy that. So there you go. Those are my favorite books. Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing else to really say. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys are interested, I recommend that you guys make your own video like this. I'll leave the 4 questions down below. If you're interested in answering them but don't want to make a video, let me know down in the comments and I'll have a little conversation with you guys about it. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching and see you guys later.